My name's Monk Rowe for the Phileas Jazz Archive in New Orleans at the 2020 Jazz Network Conference, and the place is crawling with jazz people, and I have one of them here, Frank Alkyer, who's the publisher of Downbeat and an author. Thank you for meeting with me.
Thank you.
It's
a pleasure.
I'm really nervous because you're an interviewer yourself. So
I'm nervous because I'm used to asking the questions,
yes,
not
right.
answering
Okay.
them. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to start out with an easy one. Which is more challenging, making a living as a jazz musician or making a living writing about jazz musicians?
I will speak of other people's experiences because mine has been pretty good. I grew up as a journalist, and my first job in jazz was as the editorial director for Downbeat magazine. Started there in 1989. So for me, it's been steady paycheck, good work, good work atmosphere, terrific. If you're a freelance jazz writer, very difficult, very difficult. As difficult or more difficult to make a living than it is as a jazz artist, jazz musician. Yeah.
What attracts Downbeat to people who write reviews on books and records?
Yeah. I think it's. I think they are writers who like their art along the road less traveled. It's like we are more interested in, high art than pop art. And I think they tend to be very thoughtful, very well read, very educated, very, very, before they were jazz writers, they were jazz record collectors. I don't know of anybody who wasn't a jazz record collector beforehand, and they fell in love with the liner notes of, Nat Hentoff and all the greats, So those are the things that really, really, and I'm one of them. It's like there's no question. I fell in love with jazz because I got to put the record on, carefully dust it off, slip the needle on, and read these liner notes from some of the greatest writers in the world as this beautiful music playing behind me so I can get a deeper understanding. Right. So I think those are the things that really attract them to jazz.
I remember that too when I go to the record store and you're flipping through, and sometimes it was the cover, but then you flip that thing over, and sometimes you even learned about the reviewers, and you learned, well, I like this reviewer, and if he likes this record, I'll buy it.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's just it. It's at Downbeat we're a little bit geeky. We just are. It's like you look at our record reviews, there's a star rating, there's a review, and at the end of the review, there's a track listing there's the time, how the album number, it's like the code for the album in the catalog, all the songs, how long this is. It's 46 minutes, it's 53 minutes, whatever it is. A listing of all the players that are in that band, and that's what makes our reviews different from other people. There's no other magazine that goes to that length, to really put the details out there. Because if you're listening to a record by, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, you also want to know who's the bass player, who's the drummer, and that goes for the people who are playing today as well. Yeah. So,
have you started down the path of reviewing musical releases that are not a physical product?
Yes.
Oh, you have? Okay.
We have. Yeah. There's. I don't think that there's any way around that. It's like that has changed.
Yeah.
We were talking the other day because now there's a trend that's coming up that people are not releasing full albums. They're releasing an EP, an extended play record of maybe 4 songs, or even singles. And how is Downbeat going to handle that? And I look at it and I go, I think we'll handle it exactly how we did back when we first started doing reviews in the era of the 78, when there were just 2 sides. And so you would review the 2 sides of that record. And that was it. There was no album. It was just a 78, and it would have 2 songs, 1 on each side. And I go, we're just going full circle. So,
so the hopeful musician, who they pay for the recording themselves. They make their own CDs, and they put it in an envelope. And they send it to Downbeat.
Yeah.
Is that fruitless?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not fruitless. But we get about 50,000 records a year. We in the magazine itself, maybe we review 500 to 600. So maybe 10% of maybe 10 to 15% of the records that we get in. But even in sending it to us, a lot of people just email it to us. We get links now. We get them digitally,
of course.
and a lot of times we're not even getting the physical. We still do. Those things come in, and I've got bins in my office, and the reviews editor has 3 times as many bins in his office. But but a lot of times we get them in. But what has to happen is the artist you've got to follow up. If you send it out into the ether, you need to have somebody that's going to follow up and call us and say, hey, did you get this? Did it arrive? All those things, because there are 50,000 pieces of music that come into the office every year. And if during certain periods it's much busier than others. So you got to make a phone call and try to get that to the top of the list for us to give it a listen to see if we're going to review it or not.
I'm not sure how to ask this, but I'll try. If you put on, let's say it's an actual CD, and it's really bad, but it's by a well-known artist,
Yeah.
do you think you would review it?
Yes.
Okay.
We feel a responsibility to review it. Yeah. If we put on, and when you say really bad, I want to point out that in jazz, everybody can play, and then it's what you choose to play. So everybody can play, but was it well rehearsed? Is it well produced? Are the songs compelling? Is the composition, the musicianship is pretty much always good, good to great, because they're just that good. So, but yeah, if there's a well-known artist and they put out something that the reviewer doesn't think is good and gives it 1 star, half star, 2 stars, we feel compelled to run it. If it's a brand new artist and we put it out, and we think it's going to harm them more than help them because nobody knows who they are anyway, we will oftentimes pull that review.
Okay.
Well, I just think that's fair. I think it's fair to the artist, and we let the artist know. We pulled the review, it got a 1-star review. Sometimes we'll even, if we feel, there are times that I love things that other people don't. And I can't figure out why. So we may take it and give it to another reviewer and see what they think of it. And then from there, if it, at that point, we'll say, we're not going to hurt this person's career at this point. If they become famous, then we have to really review it. Yeah.
I don't know why you just said something that reminded me. This was before your tenure. I think it was the late 70s. I remember a review released by Gap Manjone.
Yeah.
And I sort of knew Gap. Not at the time, but I knew Chuck. But it was Gap's record in the review, and apparently on the liner notes, the writer was celebrating the chemistry of the trio.
Yeah.
So the reviewer wrote, if this is chemistry, then women are wearing concrete underwear. And I did I just read that? And I'm not sure I got the exact, but that was the thrust of it. And he was really, really nasty on this review. And boy, I guess I picture Gap reading that. And
yeah.
so my follow-up question is, do you or someone have veto power? If somebody writes that kind of thing that's so...
There are times where an editor will say, or I'll say it if it comes up to me. I end up being the ombudsman for the company. People can't decide what to do with things, or there's an argument between whether we should do this or do that. The editors will come to me with that kind of problem, and then we'll work out a solution. But yeah, we'll if we think the writer is being unfair, and there are times where it slips through because it doesn't seem that way to us, and then later on I'll go, yeah, you're right. If the artist comes, sometimes the artist will call, sometimes the artist will complain, and if I think that they're correct, then I'll say, yeah, you're absolutely right. Arturo Sandoval, one time we did a double review of 2 records of his. One got 2 stars, one got 4 stars, and I went to see Arturo live, and he goes, Frank, what are you doing? I go, what's the problem? He goes, those reviews were awful. I go, Arturo, what are you talking about? He goes, the 4-star review, all you talked about were the negatives in the review. In the 2-star review, you only talked about the song that he liked. And I go, really? And I went back and I read it, and I wrote him an apology letter. And I said, you are absolutely 100% right. Wow. And I sat down with the editorial staff, and I go, this is an example of how we can go wrong. Just look at this. We have to, we're journalists. We have to figure out, we always have to say, what are we doing wrong? What's wrong with this piece that we're writing? And try to, it's kind of a weird way to live, but we're always looking for what's wrong and to correct the spelling, correct this, correct the grammar, correct the thought process. Every word was spelled right. The sentences were complete. They were compelling, but the thought process was wrong. Why not tell you what you like about a good album and why one misses, maybe? And that's all he was complaining about, and he was 100% right.
A learning process all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. 1939, the magazine was founded.
1934.
1934. Do you think you have a similar mission statement now? I didn't know I made a joke.
Well, in 1934, there was no mission statement, believe you me. The first issue, I think, was 8 pages long, and it was basically a listing of all the bands and where they were playing and who was in the bands, because the guy who started the magazine sold life insurance policies to traveling. He's also a saxophone player on the side, but he sold life insurance, and he wanted to keep track of his clients. So Downbeat started as a little newsletter for this guy who was selling life insurance. So there was not much of a mission statement other than, hey, how do I keep track of my clients in 1934? That changed pretty quickly in 1935 when this guy named Benny Goodman, this kid became an overnight sensation across the country. And Benny Goodman's from Chicago. Downbeat was a hometown magazine. We had the inside story. All boats were rising with Benny Goodman. Wow. And that became Downbeat's reason to be, covering Benny Goodman, covering everything he's doing those early days. Really, really, really. It was like Rolling Stone covering the Beatles in the 1960s. It was that kind of an element that thrust it forward. So the mission statement became pretty clear pretty quickly. But they were not journalists; they were musicians mostly. They were cantankerous. They were it's like it was. There was some funny stuff that would go on, and they were just. And I wish that we could do some of that. And I sometimes we try to get an element of it, but we just can't be quite that freewheeling when you're 85 years old and you've been around for all this time. We have a little bit more weight and veritas that we need to present in the magazine. So
plus those big bands provided such drama.
Yeah,
I have some from the mid 40s, and they first of all, the look of them is just so wonderful. But these titles like Dorsey hires New Canary.
Yeah.
and the language and the orcs, they called them orcs. For orchestra.
O-R-K, yeah.
And if some guy left some band for some other band, it was like...
Yeah. And it was connect the dots. Yeah. It was a much different thing. It was really, well, you got to think, it was very newsy. And James C. Petrillo, the union boss in Chicago, we were covering how Petrillo was trying to make musicians do things they shouldn't be doing. And James C. Petrillo was a man who had a huge ego. The C stood for Caesar. His middle name was Caesar. And he felt like, he acted like a Caesar in those days. So, you had all these stories that you go, it was really, they were trying to figure out what they were. It probably wasn't until the later 1940s and into the 1950s that Downbeat became kind of like that its mission started to become present. Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, now we've been around for a while. Here are the things we should do, and thoughtful journalism, and really, really good writers, and that kind of thing. In those early days, it was pretty freewheeling.
Do you think? Well, you probably know this. What's your target audience?
Yeah. People always ask me for demographics. And I go, I can't give you demographics. I can, but Downbeat is a psychographic. We use psychographics. People who are educated or will be educated, love music, generally have play music or have played music or will play music, want the better things in life, love the arts, and it doesn't. They could be 13, they could be 89, and that's who it is. Because that 13-year-old's going to grow up to be that person over there, and they may be a musician, or they may be a lawyer, or a doctor, or we're a magazine for readers, and we become for readers at a very young age. So I was like, look at it. Our target audience is, we really, it's like, where do you go in this world to get your audience? And we always look at it as, we really focus on musicians first, and then fans of jazz want to feel like they're backstage with the musicians, so they come next. So basically the people who go to festivals and things like that, and then anybody else who wants to come along for the ride is good. But we it's like, for example, the magazine, we give out 15,000 copies a month during the school year to junior high, high school, and college students, free. We just we steal this magazine. We give it to their band director. We give it to their professors. If you're in college, you can go to downbeat.com and sign up for a free digital subscription for as long as you're in school. All you have to do is tell us what year you're in school, where you're at, what your instrument is, what you're doubling on, and that's it. 4 quick questions, and you get a free digital subscription for as long as you're in school. Because that's our next generation.
You're setting up for the future.
Yeah, it's like I learned from going to church on Sundays that to get people into the kingdom of jazz, you reach them when they're children.
Okay. You're familiar with a publication called the Mississippi Rag?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fellow that bought it is actually an acquaintance of mine.
Yeah.
In Utica, New York. He bought it and he changed the name to the Syncopated Times.
Right.
So the reason I brought this up, they have this niche within a niche.
Yeah.
And they are very faithful and sometimes semi-obnoxious about what this music is. And
right.
Which leads me to ask, do you have some kind of way of keeping track of what kind of jazz you've written about in the last 10 issues, and what do you project for the next 10? Because there's so many styles out there,
yeah.
and some could be forgotten.
I may get the date wrong on this, but Downbeat ran a contest to rename jazz because jazz came to mean too many things to too many people, and we offered $1,000 for the winner. We wrote an editorial, put it out there, and had this contest. That was in 1939, I believe. And the winning entry was Crew Cut.
Go figure.
What the heck was that? Well, okay, let's just throw another 70, 80 years of jazz history on top of that. And you go, we can't, no, we're just going to go. Luckily, we're still a family-owned publication. The Maher family, Kevin Maher owns it. His father owned it before him. His grandfather owned it before him. And so, they're not jazz people. They're business people. And they've always stayed out of the way, and they've always had an appreciation for good editorial. That they thought they had a philosophy that good editorial will mean good ad sales, because that means we're going to have a bigger audience that's going to want to read. So that's into this is what I was hired into, and man, oh man, it's like when I talk to people in other publications and going through hard times, I think that we still succeed for a few reasons. Number one, jazz education. Number two, we're still allowed to apply our craft and really look at it as a craft and not just content. Everybody uses the word content. We don't use that in our office. What we do is we craft fine articles, and we craft fine design, and we work hard. This is what for me, it's like I want to put forth to my staff and to the world that this is a team of craftsmen, and that's what we do. So I feel like I'm going astray on the question. Reeling back in.
A person might, dear Downbeat editor,
yeah,
It's been 6 months since you said anything about trad jazz.
Yeah.
Do you try to keep this in mind? We haven't done anything. We haven't focused on any Latin musicians in the last 2 months.
Yeah, we do. Well,
Yeah.
we really try to keep in mind, okay, you know, if in our feature well, in whatever, do we have drummers? Do we have drummers as leaders and saxophonists and trumpeters? And, you know, we don't want to have 4 saxophonists every month for the next 10 months. We don't want to have all smooth jazz all the time. We don't want to have all avant-garde all the time. We have to understand. But we also have to understand that we're entertaining an audience of 75,000 readers a month in that magazine. 75,000 readers a month. You can't. I can't put somebody on the cover of the magazine who can't sell out a 200-seat room. So you've got to think about that. So there's a sales aspect to it, but it's also an art aspect. So there's a commerce side to what we do. Sure, we need to entertain this audience, and sometimes we'll take a chance and we'll try to make it make sense. It's like, hey, here's somebody over here that they appeal to this audience there, but they're important to jazz, and here's why. And they'll come along and if you do that in the right way, they'll come along for the ride for everything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but we do think about it from instrumentation, and listen, in this era, we have worked extremely hard to make sure that women instrumentalists especially are represented in the pages of Downbeat each and every month, because there are more and more and more women who are playing this music at a very high level and deserve our attention. And we need to, jazz needs to grow up in that sense. It needs to realize that, hey, this is not a boys club, and it's not going to be a boys club. 20 years from now, our industry is going to look much, and our art form is going to look much, much different from the standpoint of, race, color, sex than it does now. And we want to help lead that and not be lagging behind and be pulled along.
Do you also have a prediction about what the music might sound like?
I think that you will get much more. There'll be an I know it'll sound like very many things. You will have a group of people who are, just as you said, trad jazz, that it's a bebop focus. You're going to have somebody that's really, you're going to have an element of people who are really into technology. So I think we'll see a lot more electronic improvised music that people will say is not jazz. Is it? Is it not? Leave that up for the debate. I think you'll see more of that. But I think you'll see, one of the most freeing things for jazz artists about the streaming era is they're not really making money on CDs. So they can make their statement any way they want. They don't have a bunch of record companies that are telling them how to make their records. So they're making records they want. And a lot of them are saying, I don't want to be known as just a jazz artist. I want to be known as an artist. And so we have to go along with that too. I think you're going to see a lot more crossover kind of thing with like a Robert Glasper, along those lines. And people who are bringing in the elements of hip hop or soul or country or whatever it might be. You're just going to see that expand exponentially. Mm-hmm. So,
have you heard the line, writing about music is like dancing about architecture?
Yeah.
And I assume you've written your own record reviews.
Oh yeah.
A few thousand maybe. Do you sometimes search for that elusive adjective, describing word?
How do I describe this? Yeah. When all I want to say is, this is badass. And I have. But it's like, you as a writer of, there are like any critic, there are little isms in your writing, things that you do all the time. There are little phrases that you use, and I slap my wrist, try to break myself of that, try to move in, think of a different way to describe it. how can you really describe what they're doing? Well, one of the ways, and I think is just to work to understand music and music theory better, and use terms, musical terms, rather than kind of esoteric, this is how it makes me feel, but this is what they're doing. So, not that I'm, I am not as good as others, but that's what I try to do. Understand what they're doing, think about what they're doing, and try not to describe it in terms of like, how it makes me feel, but what they're doing and why it seems kind of cool.
Okay.
How the horns play against, are playing with each other in unison or against in counterpoint, or that it really gives it this effect of anger, grace, love, that the reasons behind it. So it's not just the words that you're using, but it's also like trying to give a little depth into what they're doing to get that feeling happen.
I think I might have been here. I saw one of the many books, sort of like How to Listen to Jazz, or perhaps it was an article. Do you ever run anything like, you might find this helpful when listening to jazz, like an article like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I like that idea, though. I may steal it.
I need a byline.
There you go. Yeah. Very good.
But because over the years I've done some workshops and stuff, and I find that there's variations on this comment. Like, I like jazz until the melody's done with it, and then I don't know what they're doing. They're just playing anything they want.
Yeah.
When in fact that's not really true.
Right.
But at any rate.
And that's when, for a lot, that's when it gets interesting for those of us that love it.
Yes.
It's like that concept of what's next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have a good relationship with Nat Hentoff?
Yeah, I did. But I always wanted him. His time at Downbeat, I don't think, ended well back in the 50s, which is a recurring theme. I'd like to think it hasn't happened as often under my, tenure there. But there were some, there were turf wars, there were people, but Nat Hentoff, I started reading Nat Hentoff, not necessarily in Downbeat, but when I lived in New York in the Village Voice when he was covering the Supreme Court, and I loved his writing. The Village Voice was my paper in New York City. That was the thing that I ran to every Thursday and bought for $1 and read it cover to cover because it was covering the things that I wanted to see. And Nat Hentoff was one of them, and he was just heroic to me. So, and he was one of those guys too. It's like, okay, after I learned about it, and this is like when I'm 22, 21, I got 23 maybe, when I got to New York. And then, so I went back and started looking up Nat Hentoff things, go to the library and look up old downbeats. It's like I heard it and read it, and still to this day, his writing, going back to your point about writing about music, what he did was ingenious and right, that he would let the artist speak. So as a result of people like Bill Gottlieb and Nat Hentoff and Dan Morgenstern, that the artist's voice is front and center in those pieces, most of those pieces, instead of having a critic that would just, wax eloquently for 2,000 words about an artist and never quote them. That doesn't have a lot of lasting value. It's interesting. But those direct interviews with those artists capturing what they were thinking at the time are gold. Mm-hmm. They're just so inspiring. Yeah. But you were asking about Nat. Sorry.
Yeah, no, he was. We got to know him a little bit. I did an interview with him, and it was a challenge. Not because he was very nice.
Yeah.
But he was Nat Hentoff. And I felt like everything I'm asking him, I hope is not like silly.
Yeah. He was a good guy. Yeah. But I think he was kind of like, But we worked on a couple of projects. It's like he would call up and, hey, Frank, I'm putting together a book. Can I get, because we owned Oh, the rights to those articles, it's of course, it's like, and for those people, we would simply just say, yeah, those are your articles. You have the right to do that. There's no charge for that.
I see.
So we would work together on things like that. And when there was an anniversary issue, we had him write some pieces for us. Yeah, and it was great. I was never happier than when a Nat Hentoff piece would run in Downbeat magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't know if you'd share this with me, but what's the biggest, most significant disaster you've had in your tenure at Downbeat, with some kind of article or a mistake?
Wow, there have been a few. The biggest disaster.
When I ask this is interesting. I rarely ask this question, with musicians, and I tried it a bunch of times. And the question was, "What's the worst gig you ever played?"
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody's ever actually answered it. And
Yeah.
if at all, it usually isn't something about the music. It's more like the bus broke down.
Yeah.
It's a non-musical thing.
Right. Well, for me, there are things that didn't happen. Things that we tried to do.
Oh.
All right, this is like, just to this day, I'll get things that didn't happen. I love Tito Puente. I got to spend time with him, got to know him. I loved his music before that. I love it after that. I love Tito Puente. And the timing of his death was such that would have been great stress on the staff to put him on the cover, and putting him on the next cover would have been too far away. So it was just, and I wish we'd have ripped up the issue and done it. We should have put Tito on the cover of the magazine when he passed away. So that missed opportunity. There was another one where B.B. King and Les Paul are in New York City. B.B.'s going to play a gig in New York City. Les is in New York City. We wanted to get B.B. King and Les Paul together to do a conversation because they both had great respect for each other. I thought this was a brilliant idea. B.B. wanted Les to go 5 blocks south to his hotel to do the interview. Les wanted B.B. to go 5 blocks north to Iridium to do the interview. We offered a limo either way. It didn't matter. Either way, we were willing to do it. The negotiations lasted about 2 weeks. We could not get either one of them to budge from their position and had to abandon this article. And it's just like, I would have loved to have that, though these two giants of their respective genres of the art form together to talk about it. So that missed opportunities. I don't think, the disasters are like not really disasters, just people not doing their job. So we've got to be there till 2 o'clock in the morning or things like that. It's stuff that goes on behind the curtain that we don't want you to see. I can't remember like doing something. We've made mistakes. We've had to correct things in the magazine. But I can't remember something that I go, yeah, we really screwed things up there. But it's just most of it was just, something happened on the back end, and we had to scramble or just like work inordinate hours to get the product out and make sure it was still good.
Yeah. You were mentioning about the cover with Tito Puente.
Yeah.
How far ahead? When does your magazine have to be done?
Yeah. Okay. So what we look at it and we start the idea. It's a 3-month process. Every magazine. So we always have like 3 magazines at all times that they're you got 1 foot in this, another foot there, and your 3rd foot is in the present. So yeah, so it's a 3-month process, but from start to finish of like, there's the day that the ads close, there's 1 month where we put together, where we literally, get the stuff in, get it edited, get it to design, get it out the door, get it uploaded to the printer. Yeah. So that's a 4-week process. But the whole thing of, assigning the interviews, arranging the interviews, getting it back in, getting the records in, reviewing the records, taking it out. But from the time that the copy literally comes in to the time it's clean, polished, designed, and put to bed is a 4-week process. The whole process, 3 months.
Who's the final person? Who's the person who finally says, "Yep, Put it to bed.
Put it to bed.
Yeah.
There's different levels of it. And it, you know, it's like I do the final approval on everything, from the design and editorial side. Bobby Reed does the final approval. So basically, the designer, the editor, they do their final approval on their side of the job. The job comes to me, and then I do my final approval on that. So I'm approving their work in essence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on the state of jazz?
Yeah.
Well, let
Lots
me hear
of
them.
I think jazz, for the people, you know, that think jazz is dead, you know, yeah, good luck. You know, no, jazz, I think jazz is healthier than it's been maybe in the history of jazz. You know, I think it probably is, as an entire ecosystem. But within that, there are problems, and the streaming issue is a problem. Record companies who have millions and millions and millions of titles can now make a living off of streaming, because they get 1/10 of a percent for every play. So they don't care which title you play. They've got millions of them. But if they get 1/10 of 1% on that title that you played, then they can make a living, and they're finally seeing a revenue stream coming out of that. The artist could never produce enough quote unquote content to maximize that. So what is there from that side of the business? What is their gain? A lot of artists are questioning, why should I make CDs? Why should I make albums? Why am I doing this? Because I'm not going to make money from it. Well, you know, it's a calling card. It gives people a reason to book you for a festival or for a tour or for this or for that. You have to do these things. But that's so wrong-minded for us, because we think an artist makes a record because they're making this. That's what you do, and you're making a statement. To me, it's like you're making that record because you want to make great art, and that's something that a lot of people are debating. You know, because you don't have the budgets, the producers, you know, the big studio money behind you and things to make a jazz record, which most of the record companies back in the day knew would not make money, but it was something they thought was the right thing to do, you know. So yeah, so I think there's a health to it, but even the record companies that are there, you look at them, they're generally jazz angels who are doing this because they love jazz, not because they're out to make money. You know, Mack Avenue Records, Gretchen Valade, Mack Avenue, she's the heiress to the Carhartt fortune, the working clothes gear, and she loves jazz. So she started a record label and has some of the finest artists in the world on that record label. She went to the Detroit Jazz Festival when it was about to go under because of, you know, the lack of funding, and she endowed it for $15 million, and then she put a management team in place to make sure that it was running smoothly and efficiently and free. She said, I'll give this money as long as this festival remains free for the city of Detroit. She gave another $8 million, I think it might be up to $10 or $12 million now, to Wayne State University to build a jazz performance facility. Right? It's right outside of Detroit. But that's a jazz angel.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's a jazz
and
saint.
yeah, and there are a few of those. There are a few of those out there. So you've got like those kinds of things. Yeah, but artists are finding different ways to make they're entrepreneurial. Jazz musicians are entrepreneurial, and they're finding ways to make that living and, you know, make their music the way that they want to make it.
Okay. Like attending this event we're at now.
Attending this event. Yeah, it used to be the old saying, you know, those who can't play teach. Well, that's so very wrong, because today you've got some of the finest jazz musicians in the world taking posts at universities,
yes,
large and small. And they're doing it because, oh, hey, they will, it's a steady paycheck, it's a pool of young artists that they can, you know, that they can use on their projects. It's health insurance, it's all the things that they want. Plus, most of these universities are giving them the space to go out and tour when they need to tour and record, because that, again, in turn, draws students to those programs.
Right.
So it's become, that's been a real really interesting development in jazz that it's a different crop of people that are taking over some of these jazz programs out there. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you pay much attention to your competitive magazines?
I used to when I was younger, and then, and I think it was probably around the 2008-9 when the big recession hit, and you know, both of the major U.S. competitors, we can say the names, Jazz Times and Jazz Is, they're friends of mine. You know, Jazz Is went dark and was sold, and came back out. You know, it's like they had some financial issues and just they couldn't no longer do it. Jazz Is magazine, the Fagans, husband and wife, great people individually. They were great together too. You know, but they got divorced, and they went dark because there was a divorce, and who's going to take over this asset? And so when that happened, I started going, you know what? I can't control what other people do. We can only control what Downbeat does. Let's just focus on Downbeat and what we do.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do want them to be healthy. I will say I do look at them every month, and if they're thin and they're not looking healthy, or you know, Jazz Is's case comes out quarterly now, that's not good for us. We need good competition. You know, it's like otherwise we'll get lazy.
Yeah.
It's human nature. So it's one of these things where I appreciate my competition. I want them to be sharp. I want them to make me better.
Okay.
Yeah.
After describing how many CDs you get every
Yeah.
year, either physical or online, I was going to ask, what do you listen to at home? But maybe you don't want to listen to anything.
It's funny, yeah, because I listen in the office a lot. But at home I'll listen to, sometimes I'll listen to jazz, sometimes I'll listen to, you know, rock, sometimes I'll listen to classical. I love country. I love music.
Yeah.
I love music. Jazz is what I do for a living, and it's informed by everything else that I hear. So I'm somebody who you will, even in the office, people go, "What are you doing in there?" Because I'll just have a playlist, and they'll go, "What is that?" And you know, it's one hit of bebop, one hit of avant-garde, a Johnny Cash record over here, Nat King Cole over there. You know, the newest big band out of Sweden out that way. It's like it's one big happy family in my mind. So yeah.
If there's one person, a musician that you could have interviewed but was gone before, or who would you have liked to have been able to sit with?
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
No, there's a lot of them. You know who I wouldn't? Miles Davis.
Well, that's interesting because of the writing and the
Yeah.
editing you've done with the
I
material.
would have been scared to death.
Yeah.
I would have been frightened to death. Frightened to death. I don't get intimidated often. He would have intimidated the living, you know what, out of me. But Monk.
Even his voice,
Yeah.
man. Like,
Yeah.
why did you say that,
Frank? Yeah, but if I could sit down with Thelonious, if I
Yeah.
could spend a day with Thelonious Monk, I would have loved to spend a day with Thelonious Monk. If I could spend a day with Ellington, oh my gosh, would that be a great day in life? Charles Mingus, if I could sit down with Charles. When I read Beneath the Underdog, when it first came out, I just go, I wish I could have, because I thought it was a brilliant book, and the way that he did it in the third person, it was just, I wish I could have spent time, because that's a brilliant mind there. Yeah, those are a few. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that I haven't spoken with it. No, that covers a pretty good swath.
Did you ever ask
Louis Armstrong?
Oh,
can't not leave that out.
Yeah.
I would have loved to sit down
Really?
and spend time with Louis Armstrong. Yeah.
Cannonball Adderley was
Oh.
my guy.
Yeah.
He still is my guy
Yeah.
as far as just the whole package. And
Oh yeah. That would be a great
we had
one,
a great
too.
interview with Nat,
Yeah.
but Cannon, we passed in '74 or something. But
Oh.
did you ever ask a question during an interview that you suspected might get you a really nasty answer, but you like fell on your sword just to see if you could get something? I don't know if I've ever done that. It takes some.
Oh. I'm a nice guy, no.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll get along fine then.
Well, you know, I think I try to ask questions in a way that's you know, my mom. I'm a farm kid from Ohio. I was raised to be polite, so even if there is a question that's a little difficult, I try to like maybe prime it with a couple of questions and then ask it in a way that will let us maybe get, you know, it's not. I don't ask it in New York style. I ask it in Midwestern style, where it's going to maybe it's going to take 10 questions to get to the answer.
Okay.
We're going to ease on down into that alley.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, good. Anything?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm thinking of people who might be watching this interview
Yeah.
and want to know how they can get their stuff noticed by you.
Yeah.
And does the cover art on a CD, for example, like, this is interesting. Let me.
Yeah.
I mean, what?
Well, that'll cut both ways. So if you've got a cover, so I just had a conversation with a young artist today, and the package that she had, and she goes, "Would you like me to send this to you, or would you like me to present it to you?" I go, "The way you phrased it, I get the feeling you want to present this to." She goes, "I am so excited about this." I go, "Then I want to get it from you." Yeah. So, and she brought it over today, and it was really, really well designed and cool. And I go, "This is great. The design is beautiful. What you've got here is really terrific. That looks great." That's something I would, if it came into the office, I go, "Oh wow, I wonder who this is. Let me check it out." But then there's other things that are, you know, the cover is so bad that I'll either go, "What is this?" and put it to the side, never pick it up again, or I go, "What is this? Let me put it on and see if it's good or bad or different." But yeah, I definitely make.
Are you looking for sidemen on it, or like who's on?
Well, first thing is like the graphic. Is the graphic cool? Does it look like something that shows the artist as they are? You know, does it give an insight into the artist? That's number one. And then if there's sidemen on it, if I don't know the artist, sidemen certainly help. So that's awfully good. And then after that, you know, it's like it generally gets, you know, the 1 minute rule, which is put it on, listen a minute the first song. All right, that's good. Let's see what the second song. Okay, you get 3 songs in, you go, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Let's listen to this now. They sound like they've got something going. So
You listen to a bit of the first 3 songs.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
yeah,
Okay.
to see if I go, you know, and if it's just something that I go just not up my alley, you know, I'll give it to one of the other guys who I think it is up their alley. If it's something that I go, this is, you know, what the heck is this? You know, I'll ask the other guys if they've listened to this, and we'll like each take a couple shots, maybe listen to a couple tracks, and see if anybody likes it. And that's what I like about, you know, we've got 3 very different people with 3 very different sets of tastes on the magazine, and we want it to be like that. So casting that net wide. You had asked earlier about that, about you know, do you make sure you've got Latin? Do you make sure you've got this? Well, we've got people with very different tastes in the office, and they listen to things and they'll say, "Hey, I really like this," and it's like it may not. I may go, "Yeah, that's not something I like," but okay, yeah, let's go. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good.
I think people watching will be watching this interview with that in mind.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
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 Good. Do you have a policy to send a letter back to people? Thanks
No.
for sending. Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah, can't do it.
Can't do it. But if they do, if they email, you know, that's one of those things. If they email, I may say, "Hey, listen, it's going to take, you know, 4 to 6 weeks for you to get an answer," and we will email them back and say, "Yeah, this is going to make. We found a slot for. We found a home for it in this issue, or
Okay.
we're not going to be able to find a home for that."
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But most people, you know, it's the sad truth is, most people are not marketing their stuff hard enough. to get it to us, to get it to the top of the pile, to get us to listen, to develop a relationship with the editors of the magazine in some way, shape, or form. There are people at this conference that we've never reviewed their stuff, but they come by the booth, they go, I'm going to get there one day. You know, it's like, and those are the people you really, really appreciate, because they get the idea that there's a lot of competition out there in recorded music, just as there's a lot of competition in jazz, and that's going to make a difference. That building that relationship with people at the company, because if it comes down to, hey Frank, we're thinking about doing this or this, I go, well, I've met him, great guy, good person, you know, a good solid artist, saw him play at the Gen Conference, saw him play at wherever. We should give that a shot. So yeah.
Great. Well, fascinating conversation.
Ah,
And I wish your magazine a healthy future. And thanks for your time today.
thank you guys. This has been an honor.